husband, who was a summa cum laude from Harvard and a writer and an intellectual, had put up an altar in one of the rooms of our apartment, and he was bowing and reading sutras. And I thought, wait, who is this person? And he was doing this because his friend Ron Epstein had been writing him, who he knew in college, had been writing to him from California about this amazing teacher that he had met. And David, who had never been religious at all in his, during his childhood, was suddenly very taken with Buddhism. So here was David doing these Buddhist things, and he told me one day that he wanted to move to California so he could study with Master Hua. So we moved to California, and I went to Gold Mountain Monastery with David. And I have to say that unlike many people who you will hear in these interviews, it still seemed really strange to me. I felt uncomfortable. I remember there was a meditation session there, and I remember sitting for the first time in my life, pulling my legs up, and after about 10 minutes in, it was like, ow, what is it? What are people doing here? I was in tears. I went up in Gold Mountain. You could go up and hide in the bedroom, and I did that. I would do a little sit, and then I would go and hide in the bedroom, and it was very hard. But it meant a lot to David, and I could see that people were very sincere, and so for me, what happened gradually was that I began to practice, and I saw that I could see changes in myself. I should go back and say that we became vegetarian before we moved to California, and that what David has told you about that. And after being a vegetarian for about 3 or 4 months, we both noticed that it had changed us. And it had changed us in the sense that we were much less angry. And that we had not, nobody had sort of told us that if you become a vegetarian, you will actually, your emotions will change. So that was interesting. Also, when we became vegetarians, we stopped killing things, which was interesting because we lived in New York City with an apartment full of cockroaches. And I had always been very afraid of spiders, just horrified, really terribly frightened of spiders. After having been vegetarian for a few months, and after having become deliberate about not killing anything on purpose, I found that I can't say spiders are my favorites anymore. I won't say that, but I no longer had that visceral aversion and fear. They were just other creatures that weren't my favorites, but I could be in the world with them, and it was that was very noticeable to me. So I'd had those 2 experiences. And one other experience that I'd had before we moved west, I was visiting my parents, my father and stepmother. My father, they were both heavy drinkers, and one night, my father got falling down drunk. I'd never seen him that drunk, and it was very upsetting to me. And I went to bed, and I couldn't sleep, and my feet were like blocks of ice. I could not warm them up. I tried rubbing them. I bundled blankets around them. They were like blocks of ice, and I thought, I'm never going to get to sleep. If I'd had a tranquilizer available to me, I would have taken it, but I didn't have one, because I was so upset about my father and the whole thing. And I remember David saying that people recited the name of Amitabha Buddha, that this was a practice. And I thought, well, I have nothing else to do. I'm going to start. So I started Namo Amitoto, Namo Amitoto, really not expecting anything. It was just, but I was desperate. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, my whole body got warm, my feet warmed up. And I was like, wow. That's pretty interesting. So that was a thing. And I remember years later asking Sherpu, do you have to asking him on behalf of people I knew, not on myself, because by then I was convinced. But I said, could I tell somebody else to recite Guanyin or Amitabha if they don't believe, if they don't have faith? And he said, first comes the practice, then comes the faith. And that just made so much sense to me. So, my whole experience with Buddhism from the beginning was, you got to show me, because it's not something that I didn't. The path came through my husband, not through me, and what I found was that, unlike in the Christianity that I've been brought up with, which had never felt comfortable to me. I didn't really understand prayer. When people talked about it, I didn't have any kind of relationship with God. It didn't make sense to me. But I found that the Buddhist practice of keeping precepts, of trying to live a consciously virtuous life to the extent that it was possible, it just worked.